Welcome, everybody. We are already 15 minutes late, but I had foreseen to skip my welcome speech. So everything will go well. I just want to welcome you today for what we can call the Odysseus Show with 400 on site and online and not less than 43 speakers. I will stop here because I want to keep time for my own presentation, and I give the floor to our chair, Jean-Louis De Bruycker, former Director General at the European Commission in DG Migration and Home Affairs, now active as director in the Egmont Institute, which is a Belgian think tank. Jean-Louis, we are at your disposal.
Okay, there we go. You should hear me. Okay. So good morning, everybody, again. I just find the right button, so it's green now. Okay. Thanks a lot for having inviting me, Philippe, to open this conference. I do not think that when the Odysseus Network decided to hold this conference here today, they had the slightest idea about the what could be the latest political development, the one that we are nowadays confronted with, which of course give a very high profile to this event. If my memory is correct, Philippe, when we had the first conversation about this event, this show, it was meant to be mainly a presentation of the fantastic work done by the Odysseus Network, the technical and the legal work done by the Odysseus Network on the pact itself and its ongoing implementation. Now, of course, the migration debate is back with a revenge, back for the worst. Let's put it that way. And that's the reason why our conversation this morning, and more in particular this session, will take a very special profile. There are 27 heads of states and government gathering in the Justice Lipsius, the Egg building next to the Justice Lipsius today and tomorrow. And unfortunately, their conversation will be again dominated by migration, as if they had not more important things to do at EU level, taking into account the challenges the EU is confronted with in the transition period. But that's life. We suggest that we dedicate this first session mainly to this political environment and the political state of play, so that later on today and tomorrow you could dwell more into the substance of the matter and the strength, weaknesses, technicalities of the pact and its implementation. We have indeed a very tight deadline. And we begin with the master of ceremony. So, I assume that Philippe will stick to the rule that he gave all of us when it comes to the timing of the presentation. We have 5 presentations this morning. I will introduce briefly the speakers, the one after the other, although I'm not so sure that they need any kind of introduction. And then we'll have something like 45 minutes for Q&A with the audience present in the room and the audience online. So, Philippe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I will try with this first presentation to explain the evolution from the classical role of the European Union adopting legislation towards a kind of new, not entirely new, but a new role as the EU starts now to be involved in implementation together with the member states, and that's why I call this coordinated implementation. So I wanted on the next slide, this one, yes, take as a point of comparison the European employment policy, which is actually based on the open method of coordination. What does that mean? Well, that objectives are set, actually guidelines, but non-binding, and that through a policy cycle, generally organized per year, recommendations are then made to the member states about the way they apply the guidelines, and then finally, there may be a kind of sanction, which in the case of the employment policy is the European Council adopting conclusions about the performance of member states. So I will pass through these 4 points to explain what happens with the migration and asylum policy. So on the next slide, of course, we discussed this morning the Asylum Migration Management Regulation that the specialists call the AMMR. And in this legislation, you can see that there are 3 parts: responsibility, solidarity, but on top of that, a common framework for migration and asylum. But asylum management, and of course, then the point is, what does that mean? Because management is a quite vague term, and this is what I will try to explain with the next slide. It is not easy to explain how the AMMR functions regarding management, because it is, of course, a quite abstract level. To provide a full picture, I think it's necessary to combine the AMMR with 2 other tools, the borders policy and the asylum policy, where you have directives and regulations that have been adopted, plus Schengen, as you will see. Why to include those areas in the analysis? Because they are complementary. They play a complementary role to the AMMR. In the next slide, as you can see, I tried there to summarize the goal of the 3 areas. For AMMR, it is, of course, especially solidarity between the member states that we will discuss later today. Regarding borders, the idea is to produce IBM, integrated border management, and about the asylum policy, it is to implement a good asylum policy. What is interesting is to see that under this management, the European Commission is going to collect a very large set of information that it will collect and produce and make public through a report that will cover irregular migration, but also asylum. And then I have listed 3 elements to show you the broadness of this report: the external dimension, including the geopolitical situation, projections in terms of migration and asylum for the next year, and then the level of preparedness of member states. So you see that this can be an extraordinary tool. But of course, the point is what will be done with all this information. On the next slide. Thank you very much. This is the first slide about strategies. What kind of strategies do we have? As you can see in the AMMR, we will have national strategies per member states and a European long-term strategy adopted by the Commission. The same for the borders area. What is a bit strange is that they are not adopted in the same way. It's the reverse. In the area of borders, they start with the European strategy and then member states adopt their own strategy. Regarding asylum, no strategy is foreseen. But of course, in the area of asylum, one may think that the EU Asylum Agency and the member states will benefit, of course, from the strategies prepared under the AMMR. One very clear quote of Article 7 to say that actually it's clearly about implementation, because it is said that member states shall have national strategies to ensure that they have the capacity to effectively implement their asylum and migration system. It's difficult to be more clear than that. On the next slide, this time it's about policy cycles. They are normally organized on a yearly basis, but the most developed policy cycle is the one for the AMMR. It will start with a report made by the European Commission on 15 of October, the report with all the information that I have quoted, and then it will be followed by a Commission implementing acts determining the member states in need of solidarity, And then finally, the Council will adopt an act on the solidarity pool. In the area of borders, the results are evaluated after a period of 4 years, as you can see. Regarding asylum, no policy cycle. Yes, there is an asylum report adopted every year, but it is very descriptive. But once again, that area will benefit from the policy cycle developed under the AMMR. Interestingly, under Schengen, that's new and it has developed in practice without a legal basis. You see that you have a commission report on the state of Schengen every year. The Council, the Schengen Council, plays then a role and intervenes at different stages. You have also a Schengen forum, and at the end, the practice is new. The Commission will will propose to the Council recommendation regarding Schengen. On the next slide, we look now to the monitoring. And as you can see, regarding the AMMR, the provision is quite vague. It is just set under Article 7 that the Commission monitors migration situation through regular reports. It's difficult to say less than this. But we have then, in terms of monitoring for borders, a very strong process, which is the vulnerability assessment procedure that involves the management board of Frontex. And we have something similar for the asylum agency, but in that area, the Commission can adopt recommendation addressed to member states. Of course, regarding Schengen, I will not speak a lot about that because it is well known. You have the Schengen evaluation mechanism, which is quite strong, with recommendation made by the Commission or the Council to the member states. On the next slide, about sanctions. What happens? Well, actually, regarding the AMMR, there are no sanctions foreseen. And I have one question, and maybe that Esther Pozzovera, who is the head of the asylum unit of the Commission, will tell us what happened with the idea that was mentioned at one moment to impose to member states a fine of 20,000 euros per asylum seeker that they would refuse to relocate. It was floating in the air, but it's not in the text adopted. Regarding borders area, well, you have a very strong sanction, which is a threat because it is so strong, the possibility to reimpose internal border controls against the member states that would not control effectively the external borders. In the area of asylum, nothing. And in the area of Schengen, there you have action plans that are legally binding. Member states must respect them, though this is quite strong. Now, once again, one last word about this slide. You see that the IMMR has no sanctions, but it will benefit, of course, from the area of borders and Schengen. And then, of course, you have the infringement procedure that can, in general, always be used. On the next slide, I have made here a synthesis about the 4 slides that I have presented. You can see the way I've tried to evaluate the 4 elements. What is my conclusion? Well, as you can see, if you look at the column regarding the AMMR, you could say, well, the evaluation is that the AMMR is rather weak. Yes, but once again, I think it's not the case because you have to combine the AMMR with the process under borders, asylum, and Schengen areas. And the AMMR will benefit from all this. On the next slide, I will already conclude because I try to speak quicker than my watch. And it works for the moment, but nevertheless, it is time to conclude. Just one general point, you have nothing in this exercise about implementation regarding legal migration. You may have specific reasons for that. but that's an element which shows a disbalanced policy, at least for the moment. About the three elements that I want to mention, it's now clear that the European Union, through the tools that I have mentioned, will contribute to the implementation of policy objectives. But then, of course, to which level of details? This, of course, remains to be seen. The EU will also monitor the implementation by member states, but will those mechanisms be effective and used efficiently? With, I think, one problem that may appear in the area of borders and asylum, the fact that the monitoring is done by the agencies, but agencies are not really independent towards member states. So they have to evaluate member states, but they depend upon member states sitting in the management board. I think that there is there a kind of contradiction, but this is linked, of course, to the general problem of the organization of agencies. The EU can take some kind of sanctions, as I have mentioned, but not in the area of solidarity and asylum. And I think that there we can say that this is a real weakness, knowing that the general procedure, the infringement procedure launched by Commission before the court, has up to date been very rarely used. And on my last slide, my last point for conclusions, what we can say, I think, is that we see a move now towards what we can call a kind of method of coordination between member states and Commission regarding the implementation. And this 23 years after Commission proposals that were made in 2001, and you can see the documents of reference. And I want to mention it because it is interesting to see that actually we progress, but not always that quickly. And I wanted especially to mention this because those documents were elaborated under the supervision of Jean-Louis De Bruycker, who was at that moment head of the migration and asylum unit, and he may tell us maybe how he sees the evolution that happened, keeping in mind this pioneer proposal of the Commission that were clearly refused at that time by the member states. Just to say that the method of coordination is not that open like employment, where a space is given to social partners. Here we have under the AMMR very little space given to international organizations and NGOs. Also to conclude, well, the AMMR combined with the tools under borders, asylum and Schengen, I think is a promising tool, but only the future will tell us to which extent the contribution of the EU to implementation and the coordination between member states and the EU in the area of implementation will be successful. That's something to discuss in the future, but knowing that this is a new area and probably, I think, a promising one, because one observation that we can, I think, do is that legislation has not always been a success in the area of asylum and migration in the European Union. I think in 13 to 14 minutes, I managed to make this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philippe. I will refrain from answering your question, and maybe we'll come back indeed on that during the Q&A session.